Marcus Hale had spent most of his life learning how to live without being loved. He grew up in a quiet, worn-down neighborhood outside Macon, Georgia, the kind of place where people kept their heads down and their problems to themselves. His father left when he was 8. No explanation. No goodbye. Just an empty chair at the dinner table and a silence that stretched for years. His mother didn't leave, but in many ways, she wasn't really there either. She worked double shifts at a nursing home, coming home late with tired eyes and aching hands. She provided what Marcus needed to survive, but not much more. There were no long conversations, no warm reassurances, no one asking how he felt. So Marcus learned early, feelings didn't matter. Stability did. He became the quiet kid, the dependable one, the boy who didn't cause trouble because he knew no one had the time or energy to deal with it. Teachers liked him, neighbors trusted him, but no one really knew him, and that followed him into adulthood. At 34, Marcus had built a life that looked solid from the outside. He worked as a construction supervisor, steady income, long hours, predictable routine. He showed up early. He stayed late. He didn't complain. People described him the same way over and over again. Reliable, quiet, good man, but never happy. Relationships had never been easy for him. Not because he didn't want them, but because he wanted them too much. He held on too tightly, gave too much, too fast. He didn't know how to do things halfway. When he cared, he went all in. And more than once, that had cost him. Women came into his life and left just as quickly. Some said he was too serious. Others said he expected too much. One woman had told him, bluntly, "You love like you're trying to fix something that already broke." Marcus didn't argue, because deep down, he knew she was right. He wasn't just looking for love. He was looking for something to replace everything he never had. He met Alyssa Grant on a warm Thursday afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. No music. No sparks flying across a crowded room. Just a haircut. Marcus had walked into a small salon after work, still wearing his dusty boots and a faded gray shirt. He almost left when he saw how clean and polished the place looked, like he didn't belong there. Then she called his name. Marcus. He turned, and for a moment, he forgot what he was there for. Alyssa stood behind the chair, one hand resting casually on the back, the other holding a comb. She had this effortless confidence, the kind that didn't need attention but drew it anyway. Her smile wasn't forced. Her eyes didn't scan him up and down like most people did. She just looked at him, like she saw him. Marcus cleared his throat and sat down. "I don't need anything fancy," he said. "Just clean it up." Alyssa smiled slightly. "I figured you'd say that." There was something about the way she said it, like she already understood him. The conversation started simple. Work, weather, small things. But then it shifted. "Construction?" she asked, running her fingers through his hair. "That's hard work." Marcus shrugged. "Pays the bills." "Yeah," she said softly. "But that's not the same as living." He didn't respond right away, because no one had ever said that to him before. He came back the next week, and the week after that. At first, he told himself it was just the haircut. But it wasn't. It was her. The way she talked to him like he mattered. The way she asked questions and actually listened to the answers. The way she laughed. Not loudly, not for attention, but like she genuinely enjoyed the moment. For Marcus, it felt new. One evening, after closing, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "You always this quiet, or is it just me?" Marcus gave a small smile. "Only when it matters." Alyssa tilted her head, studying him for a second. "Good," she said. "I don't like men who talk just to hear themselves." There was a pause. Then she added, almost casually, "But I do like men who mean what they say." Something shifted in Marcus right then. Not sudden, not overwhelming, but real. Their first real date wasn't anything extravagant. A small diner, 2 plates of food, a conversation that lasted longer than either of them expected. Marcus found himself talking more than usual. About work, about growing up, even about things he hadn't said out loud in years. Alyssa listened, not interrupting, not judging, just listening. At one point, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "You've been carrying a lot," she said quietly. Marcus looked down. "I'm used to it." Alyssa shook her head. "You shouldn't have to be." That was the moment. Not when she touched him, not when she smiled, but when she made him feel like he didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Marcus started coming home earlier, sleeping better, smiling more. For the first time in a long time, His life didn't feel like something he was just surviving. It felt like something he was building. With her, he introduced her to the only family he had left, his younger brother, Daniel. And as Alyssa stood beside him, laughing, blending into his world so easily, Marcus allowed himself to believe something he had never fully trusted before. That maybe, just maybe this time, love would stay. If Marcus Hale was built on restraint, Daniel Hale was built on impulse. The brothers had grown up under the same roof, shaped by the same absence, but they had become completely different men. Where Marcus learned to control everything he felt, Daniel refused to control anything at all. At 30, Daniel was the kind of man people noticed the moment he walked into a room. Not because he tried, but because he didn't. He moved with a loose, effortless confidence, the kind that came from never taking life too seriously. He worked nights as a bartender, drifting from one shift to the next, one conversation to another. He knew how to read people, how to make them laugh, how to make them feel seen, at least for a moment. Commitment had never interested him. Responsibility, even less. Marcus had spent most of his life cleaning up after him, paying off debts, covering for missed obligations, offering a place to stay when Daniel burned through whatever opportunity he had last. It wasn't something Marcus complained about. It was just what he did. Daniel was his brother. And family, to Marcus, wasn't optional. "You ever gonna slow down?" Marcus asked him once, standing in the doorway of his apartment as Daniel got ready to head out for another night. Daniel smirked, adjusting his jacket. "Why would I? You already got the serious life covered." "That's not how it works," Marcus said. Daniel shrugged. "Works just fine for me." There was no anger in his voice. No defensiveness. Just a simple truth. Daniel didn't want the kind of life Marcus was building. And Marcus had long since accepted that. When Marcus introduced Alyssa to Daniel, it wasn't something he overthought. To him, it was natural. Alyssa was becoming a part of his life, and Daniel was already a permanent piece of it. They met on a quiet Sunday afternoon at Marcus's place. Nothing formal. Just food, a couple of drinks, and the kind of casual conversation that usually filled the space between them. Daniel arrived late, like he always did. He stepped inside, glanced around, then stopped when he saw her. Alyssa stood near the kitchen counter, sunlight catching the soft waves of her hair. She turned as the door closed, her expression open, curious. For a second, just a second, Daniel didn't say anything. Then he smiled. "Well," he said, walking in. "Guess you finally did it." Marcus frowned slightly. "Did what?" "Found someone worth staying in for." Alyssa let out a small laugh. "Is that a compliment?" Daniel's eyes stayed on her just a moment longer than necessary. "Depends how you take it." Marcus didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't think anything of it. The three of them fell into conversation easily. Daniel had always been good at that, pulling people in, making them feel like they'd known him longer than they actually had. Alyssa didn't resist it. If anything, she leaned into it. They joked. They traded stories. They moved through topics without effort. But underneath it all, something unspoken lingered. Small things. The way Daniel's gaze returned to Alyssa when she wasn't looking. The way Alyssa held eye contact with him just a beat too long when she was. The subtle shift in energy when Marcus stepped out of the room, even for a moment. At one point, Marcus went upstairs to grab something he'd forgotten. The moment he disappeared, the air changed. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her. "So," he said, voice quieter now. "You're the one who got him talking." Alyssa crossed her arms loosely, not defensive, just aware. "Was that supposed to be hard?" Daniel smirked. "For him? Yeah." She tilted her head. "He just needed someone to listen." Daniel let out a soft chuckle. "Or maybe he just needed someone like you." There was no flirtation in his tone, but there was something else. Something sharper. Alyssa didn't look away. "And what's that supposed to mean?" she asked. Daniel held her gaze. "Someone who knows exactly what they're doing." Silence stretched between them for a moment. Not awkward. Not tense. Just charged. Alyssa's lips curved slightly, but she didn't respond. Instead, she looked past him, toward the stairs. Marcus was coming back. And just like that, whatever had been there disappeared. From Marcus's perspective, everything felt right. More than right. For the first time, the two parts of his life that had always been separate, his family and his relationships, were blending without conflict. Alyssa fit in. Daniel didn't push boundaries. There were no arguments. No tension. Just an easy, natural rhythm. That was enough for Marcus. Because Marcus didn't look for problems. He looked for peace. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started coming around more often. At first, it made sense. Marcus had space, a place to crash after late shifts, a couch that was always available. Alyssa didn't seem to mind. In fact, she seemed comfortable. Too comfortable, if anyone had been paying close attention. One night, Marcus stepped outside to take a phone call. When he came back in, he paused for just a second. Daniel and Alyssa were standing in the kitchen. Close. Not touching, but close enough that it registered. They stepped apart the moment they noticed him. Daniel grabbed a drink. Alyssa smiled. "Everything okay?" she asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, just work." He didn't question it. Didn't push. Because nothing had actually happened. Not yet. Marcus trusted two people in his life. His brother, and the woman he believed he was building a future with. And in his mind, those two things could never cross a line. Because trust, to Marcus, wasn't complicated. It was absolute. You either had it, or you didn't. What he didn't understand, not yet, was that sometimes, the people you trust the most don't break it all at once. They do it slowly, quietly, right in front of you. By the time Friday came around, Marcus Hale had made up his mind. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed things. He took his time, measured every step, built slowly, carefully, the way he did everything in his life. But with Alyssa, something felt different. Not reckless, just certain. That night, he wanted to move forward. Nothing dramatic, no grand gesture, just a quiet conversation about where they were headed and where they could go. He got home early, something he rarely did, and set everything up himself. A simple dinner. Steak, potatoes, a bottle of wine he'd been saving. The table was clean. The lights dimmed just enough to feel warm, not staged. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Alyssa arrived just after 7. She stepped inside, pausing as she looked around. "Well," she said, a small smile forming. "This is new." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, slightly self-conscious. "Figured I'd try something different." She walked closer, setting her bag down, her eyes softening. "I like it." They ate, talked, laughed, nothing forced, nothing strained. For Marcus, it felt like the kind of night he'd imagined but never quite had. At one point, Alyssa leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You've been quiet tonight," she said. Marcus looked at her for a moment before answering. "Just thinking. About." He hesitated, then decided not to hold back. "About us." Alyssa didn't respond right away. Not with words. But she didn't look away either. Marcus continued, his voice steady but low. "I don't do this halfway, Alyssa. I never have. If I'm in, I'm in." A small pause. "I just need to know I'm not the only one." The room felt still. Not tense. Just waiting. Alyssa slowly stood up from her chair and walked around the table. She stopped in front of him. For a second, she just looked at him. Really looked at him. Like she was deciding something. Then she reached out, her fingers lightly touching his face. And she said it. "I love you, Marcus." The words landed heavier than anything else she could have said. Marcus didn't react right away. He just stared at her, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. "Say that again," he said quietly. Alyssa didn't hesitate. "I love you." This time, it settled in. Not as a surprise, but as something he had been waiting for his entire life. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For the first time in years, he felt safe. That night, everything felt right. Simple, quiet, real. They fell asleep next to each other, the kind of sleep that comes easy when your mind finally lets go of its defenses. Marcus didn't wake up from a noise or a dream. He woke up because something felt off. The space beside him was cold. He reached out instinctively. Empty. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dark. The room was silent. Too silent. Marcus sat up, glancing toward the bathroom. The door was open. No light. He checked his phone. 2:14 a.m. He swung his legs off the bed and stood. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe she went to get water. Maybe she couldn't sleep. But as he stepped into the hallway, something shifted. A faint sound. Not loud, but unmistakable. A soft rhythm. A breath. Then another. Marcus froze. His eyes moved slowly down the hallway. There was only one place the sound could be coming from. Daniel's room. The door wasn't fully closed. Just slightly open. A thin line of darkness cutting through the frame. Marcus didn't move closer right away. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, everything connected. The looks. The silence. The closeness. All the things he had noticed, but never questioned. Now they made sense. The sound came again, clearer this time. Marcus's chest tightened, but his face didn't change. No anger, no shock, just stillness. He took one step forward, then stopped. His hand hovered slightly, not reaching for the door, because he didn't need to see. He already knew. On the other side of that door was the only confirmation he would ever need. Marcus stood there for a few seconds, then slowly stepped back. No confrontation, no noise. He turned around and walked back to his room. Alone. He didn't sleep after that. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The words echoed in his head. I love you. Over and over. The same voice. The same tone. Now meaning something completely different. By morning, the house would look the same. Nothing broken. Nothing out of place. But Marcus knew the truth. Something had ended that night. Not loudly. Not visibly. But completely. And whatever replaced it was no longer love. Morning came like it always did. Soft light through the blinds. The quiet hum of a neighborhood waking up. Nothing in the house looked different. But everything was. Marcus Hale hadn't slept. Not even for a minute. He had sat on the edge of the bed until the sky began to shift from black to gray, his mind replaying the same moment over and over again. The door. The sound. The realization. By the time he stood up, whatever shock might have existed was gone. What replaced it was something colder. Controlled. He moved through the kitchen with steady, deliberate motions. Coffee first. Always coffee. The routine mattered. It gave him something to hold on to. The machine clicked. The smell filled the air. Marcus didn't rush. He poured a cup, took a sip, set it down. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Alyssa. Morning, babe. Her voice was light, easy, as if the night before had never happened. Marcus didn't turn right away. He let the silence sit for a second longer than usual. Then he looked over his shoulder. Morning. No edge in his voice. No accusation. Just normal. Alyssa walked past him, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. She moved comfortably, like she always did. Like she belonged there. Marcus watched her for a moment, looking for something. Guilt. Hesitation. A crack in the performance. There was none. She poured herself coffee, then leaned casually against the counter. You're up early, she said. Couldn't sleep. She nodded, not asking anything further. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. She didn't ask why. A few minutes later, Daniel walked in. Slower than usual. Quieter. He didn't make eye contact right away. Morning, he muttered, heading straight for the fridge. Marcus watched him too. Not openly, but carefully. Morning, Marcus replied. Daniel grabbed a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap without looking up. For a second, the three of them stood in the same room. The same kitchen, breathing the same air. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Marcus could feel it. Daniel could feel it. Alyssa didn't show it. No one mentioned the night before. No one said a word. And that silence, that deliberate, shared silence, was louder than anything Marcus had expected. Because if it had been a mistake, if it had been something they regretted, there would have been tension, apologies, avoidance, something. But this felt practiced, controlled, as if they had already agreed, without ever saying it out loud. Marcus picked up his coffee and took another sip. Then he spoke. Not about what happened. Not even close. You working tonight? He asked Daniel. Daniel hesitated for half a second. Yeah. Late shift. Marcus nodded. Good. That was it. No follow-up. No change in tone. But the word hung in the air longer than it should have. Daniel glanced at him then, quickly, like he was trying to read something. Marcus gave him nothing. The rest of the morning moved forward like any other. Alyssa checked her phone. Daniel sat at the table, quiet. Marcus got ready for work. Normal. Perfectly normal. And that was what made it unbearable. Because Marcus wasn't angry. Not in the way people expect. There was no explosion building inside him. No urge to shout or break something or demand answers. That version of him didn't exist. What existed instead was something far more dangerous. A mind that had already started organizing what it knew. Every look, every pause, every detail, filing them away, connecting them, understanding them. Before he left, Marcus paused by the door. He looked back once. Alyssa was sitting on the couch now, scrolling through her phone, her expression calm. Daniel had his head down, elbows on his knees. For a moment, it looked like any other morning, any other life. Marcus studied them both. Then he spoke, not loudly, not emotionally, just enough to be heard. I'll see you tonight. Alyssa looked up and smiled. Okay. Daniel didn't respond. Marcus nodded once and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And just like that, the house returned to silence. But Marcus carried something with him as he stepped into the daylight. Not confusion, not denial, certainty. He didn't need to ask what happened. He didn't need to hear it from them. He had already seen enough. And now, he was going to watch. Marcus didn't confront them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask questions. He didn't give them the chance to lie. Instead, he watched. That first day, he moved through his routine like nothing had changed. He showed up to work on time, spoke to his crew, checked schedules, signed off on deliveries. If anyone noticed anything different, they didn't say it. But Marcus wasn't really there. His body was on the site. His mind was somewhere else, replaying, analyzing, connecting. He wasn't trying to figure out what happened anymore. He already knew. What he needed now was confirmation. That night, when he came home, the house was quiet. Alyssa was in the kitchen, cooking. Music played softly in the background. She turned when she heard the door. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You're late." Work ran long. He set his keys down, his movements calm, controlled. She walked over, leaned in, kissed him lightly. Marcus didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. It was the smallest difference. So small most people wouldn't notice. But Alyssa paused for a fraction of a second before stepping back. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." And that was the end of it. No follow-up. No tension. Just another layer of silence added to everything that hadn't been said. Later that night, while Alyssa was in the shower, Marcus picked up her phone. Not aggressively. Not out of panic. Just deliberately. He knew the passcode. She had given it to him weeks ago, laughing, saying, "I don't have anything to hide." The screen lit up. Messages. He didn't scroll right away. He didn't need to rush. Then he opened the thread. "Daniel." The first message he saw was from earlier that afternoon. "Daniel, we need to be careful." A pause in the conversation. Then Alyssa's reply. "Alyssa, I know." Marcus read it again. No denial. No confusion. Just acknowledgement. He scrolled further. "Daniel, last night shouldn't have happened." A longer pause. Then, "Alyssa, then why did it feel like that?" Marcus stared at the words. His face didn't change, but something inside him shifted. Not sharply, not violently, just deeper. He locked the phone and set it back exactly where he found it. No evidence he had touched it. No trace. Because this wasn't about catching them. It was about understanding how far it had already gone. The second day, Marcus paid attention to things he had never noticed before. Not because they were hidden, but because he had never thought to look. That morning, Alyssa avoided his eyes for just a second longer than usual. Not enough to be obvious, but enough. Daniel didn't come into the kitchen right away. When he did, he kept his distance. Marcus watched all of it without reacting. At work, he found himself replaying the messages again. Then why did it feel like that? It wasn't just physical. That was the part that stayed with him. It meant something else had crossed the line. Something deeper. That evening, Marcus came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He stepped inside without making noise, setting his keys down gently. Voices. Low. From the kitchen. He moved closer, stopping just before the doorway. He didn't step in. He didn't need to. Alyssa's voice came first. Soft. Controlled. "We can't keep doing this." A pause. Then Daniel. Then stop pretending with him. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Marcus felt it more than he heard it. Alyssa spoke again, quieter now. "It's not that simple." Daniel let out a short breath. "It is. You're just not ready to say it." Marcus stood there, just out of sight. Listening. Not reacting. Not interrupting. Because this was the truth. Unfiltered. Unaware. He stepped back before they could see him. Then walked outside, closing the door softly behind him. When he came back in a few minutes later, they were sitting apart. Like nothing had happened. Alyssa looked up. "Oh, you're home early." Marcus nodded. "Yeah." That was all. No questions. No suspicion in his voice. Just the same calm, steady presence. And again she accepted it. By the third day, Marcus no longer needed proof. He had more than enough. But he kept watching anyway. Because the more he saw, the clearer everything became. The way Alyssa checked her phone, then quickly locked it when he entered the room. The way Daniel avoided staying too long when Marcus was around, but never stopped coming entirely. The way their conversations felt slightly off, like there were pieces missing. Marcus didn't fill in those pieces. He already knew what they contained. That night, he sat alone in the living room while Alyssa slept. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not confusing. Not heavy. Just final. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands together, staring at the floor. 3 days. That was all it took. 3 days to confirm that it wasn't a mistake. 3 days to understand that it wasn't going to stop. 3 days to accept that the two people he trusted most had already chosen something else. Marcus didn't cry, didn't break. He just sat there thinking, not about what he had lost, but about what was left. And for the first time since that night, his mind wasn't searching for answers anymore. It was moving toward something else. Something quiet. Something controlled. Something irreversible. By the end of the 3rd day, Marcus Hale wasn't searching for truth anymore. He had it. What changed was what that truth began to do to him. From the outside, nothing shifted. He still woke up early, still went to work, still spoke in the same calm, measured tone. If anyone had looked at him, they would have seen the same man, steady, controlled, dependable. But inside, something had been rewired. Love didn't disappear. It changed. It stopped being something that gave him peace and became something that wouldn't let him rest. He found himself replaying moments that used to feel safe. Alyssa's voice when she said, "I love you." The way she touched his face that night. The way he believed her. Now those same memories felt distorted. Like something familiar seen through broken glass. He wasn't asking if she meant it anymore. He was asking how she could say it and do what she did hours later. That contradiction didn't create confusion. It created pressure. A slow, tightening weight that never fully lifted. At work, Marcus moved through tasks automatically. "Hey, you good?" one of the guys asked him during a break. Marcus nodded without looking up. "Yeah, just tired." The man shrugged and walked away. That was enough. Marcus had spent his whole life learning how to appear fine. Now he used that skill perfectly, because whatever was happening inside him didn't show on the surface. That night, he came home to find Alyssa on the couch, her legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, I missed you today." The words landed, but they didn't reach him the way they used to. Marcus set his keys down slowly. "Yeah." She nodded, standing up and walking toward him. "Yeah." She wrapped her arms around him. Marcus stood still for a second before returning the gesture. But it was different now. Subtle. Measured. Like he was aware of every movement instead of feeling it. Alyssa pulled back slightly, studying his face. "You've been distant," she said. Marcus met her eyes. "Have I?" There was no defensiveness in his voice. Just a question. Alyssa hesitated. "Just feels like something's off." Marcus held her gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Work's been a lot. It was simple, believable, and she accepted it, because she wanted to. Later that night, they lay in bed together. The same bed, the same space where, just days ago, everything had felt real. Alyssa rested her head on his chest, her hand lightly tracing his arm. Marcus stared at the ceiling. Awake, aware, every second stretching longer than it should. "Marcus," she whispered. "Yeah. You know I love you, right?" There it was again. The same words. The same tone. But now, they felt empty. Or maybe worse. Marcus didn't respond right away. Not because he didn't hear her, but because he was deciding something. Then, finally, "I know." 2 words. Flat. Controlled. Enough to end the conversation. Alyssa didn't push further. She closed her eyes, settling back against him. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. Sleep came easy for her. Marcus stayed awake. He turned his head slightly, looking down at her. Her face was calm, peaceful, untouched by everything he now carried. For a moment, something almost surfaced. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to disbelief. Was any of it real? He whispered under his breath. She didn't move. Didn't answer. Of course she didn't. Marcus exhaled slowly and leaned his head back. The question didn't need an answer anymore. Because the truth wasn't in what she said. It was in what she did. Sometime after midnight, Marcus slipped out of bed without waking her. He walked into the living room and sat down. No lights. Just the faint glow from the street outside filtering through the windows. He rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. Still, focused. This wasn't about emotion anymore. Not in the way it used to be. The pain had settled into something quieter. Something colder. Something that didn't need to be expressed out loud. He wasn't thinking about leaving. He wasn't thinking about forgiving. Those options didn't exist in his mind. What existed instead was clarity. A clear understanding of what had happened. Of what it meant. of what it changed. Marcus had spent his entire life believing that love was something you held on to, something you protected, something that, once given, couldn't be taken lightly. Now he understood something else. That love, when broken the right way, didn't disappear. It transformed into something heavier, something sharper, something that stayed and didn't let go. By the fourth night, Marcus Hale had stopped waiting for something to change. There were no more questions left in him, no more doubt to work through. The truth had settled, clear and unmoving, and with it came a kind of calm that didn't feel like peace. It felt like resolution. That evening moved like all the others. Alyssa came home, greeted him with a soft smile, asked about his day. Marcus answered the way he always did, steady, quiet, giving nothing away. They ate together, sat across from each other like a couple who still belonged in the same space. She talked about small things, a client at work, a joke someone made, pieces of a normal life. Marcus listened, nodded when it was expected, but none of it reached him anymore. Because underneath every word she spoke, there was something else he couldn't unhear. Daniel's voice, Alyssa's hesitation, the truth they thought he didn't know. Later that night, Marcus stood by the window in the living room, staring out into the darkness. The street was quiet, empty, still. Behind him, Alyssa moved through the house, getting ready for bed. Normal sounds, running water, a drawer opening, a light clicking off. Everything felt ordinary. And that was the final piece. Because if everything could feel this normal after what had happened, then nothing about it was going to stop. Marcus turned slightly, his eyes drifting toward the hallway. For a brief moment, he stood there without moving. Then he made a decision. Not sudden, not emotional, just chosen. Alyssa, he called. His voice carried just enough to reach her. She stepped out into the hallway, brushing her hair back. Yeah. Marcus grabbed his keys from the table. Come take a drive with me. She paused. Now. Yeah. Just need some air. There was nothing unusual in his tone. No tension. No urgency. Just the same calm she had grown used to. Alyssa studied him for a second, then nodded. Okay. The car ride started in silence. Marcus drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The engine hummed softly, cutting through the stillness of the night. Alyssa sat beside him, her body angled slightly toward the window. She didn't ask questions at first. She waited, because something about the silence felt different. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just intentional. Streetlights passed over them in slow intervals, casting brief flashes of light across Marcus's face. His expression didn't change. Where are we going? She finally asked. Marcus didn't look at her. Just driving. That was all. No explanation. Alyssa shifted slightly in her seat. Okay. She let the word hang there, hoping for more. But nothing came. Minutes passed, longer than they should have. The city faded behind them, replaced by quieter roads, fewer lights, wider stretches of darkness. Marcus slowed the car slightly, then spoke. You said you loved me. His voice was calm, flat. Alyssa turned her head toward him. I do. He nodded once, eyes still forward. Then why him? The question landed without force. No accusation, no anger, just truth. Alyssa didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened slightly in her lap. It wasn't, she started, then stopped. Marcus didn't interrupt, didn't push. He just waited. Because this was the moment. The only moment that mattered. Alyssa took a breath. I didn't plan it. Marcus let that sit, then nodded again. Okay. One word. No emotion. But something in it closed the door. They drove a little further before Marcus pulled over. A quiet stretch of road. No houses nearby. No passing cars. Just darkness and the faint sound of wind moving through the trees. He turned off the engine. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before it. Alyssa looked at him now. Really looked. For the first time that night, something shifted in her expression. Uncertainty. Marcus, what's going on? He finally turned his head, met her eyes. And in that moment, she saw it. Not anger. Not pain. Something else. Something colder. More distant than she had ever seen him. You said you loved me, he repeated quietly. Alyssa swallowed. I do. Marcus held her gaze for a few seconds longer. Then he spoke again. And you still went to him. There was no room left in the sentence. No space for explanation. No space for denial. Just the truth, laid out exactly as it was. Alyssa opened her mouth. Closed it. Then finally, I didn't mean for it to happen. Marcus nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something. Not changed it. Not softened it. Just confirmed it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air inside the car felt still, almost frozen. Alyssa shifted slightly, her voice lower now. "We can fix this." Marcus didn't respond. Didn't move. He just looked at her. And whatever she saw in his eyes made her stop talking. Because in that moment, Alyssa realized something. This wasn't a conversation. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't even about forgiveness. Whatever had been building inside Marcus over the past 3 days had already reached its end. And what came after that was something she didn't understand. Something she couldn't reach. Marcus turned his gaze forward again. The road stretched out ahead of them, empty and dark. For the first time since he got into the car, he exhaled. Slow. Controlled. And in that breath, the decision was complete. The silence after Marcus's last breath didn't break. It settled. Heavy. Final. Alyssa sat beside him, her body still angled slightly toward him, but something in her posture had changed. The confidence she carried so easily before was gone. In its place was uncertainty, quiet, creeping, undeniable. "Marcus," she said softly. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't hear her, but because, for the first time, he wasn't listening anymore. His hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers still, his eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. The road stretched out beyond the windshield, empty and endless. Alyssa shifted in her seat. "This doesn't have to be," she started. Marcus moved. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just decisively. He turned toward her. And for a brief second, everything slowed. Alyssa saw his face clearly in the dim light. There was no anger there. No raised voice. No trembling hands. Just a calm that didn't belong in that moment. Something distant. Something unreachable. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice tightening now. But the moment for explanation had already passed. Everything that could have been said had been. Everything that could have been changed hadn't. What followed didn't feel like an outburst. There was no explosion of emotion. No chaotic struggle filling the car with noise. It unfolded in a way that was almost quiet. Controlled. Measured. Alyssa's voice rose. Confusion first, then fear, but it never reached a scream loud enough to carry beyond the car. The world outside remained still, untouched by what was happening inside. Marcus didn't shout. Didn't say another word. Whatever he felt stayed contained. Locked behind that same expression he had carried for days. By the time it ended, the silence returned. Deeper than before. The kind of silence that doesn't wait to be broken. Marcus sat there for a long moment. His breathing steady. His posture unchanged. Alyssa no longer moved. The space between them, once filled with words, with warmth, with something that felt real, was now empty. Completely. Marcus looked at her. Not with rage. Not even with grief. Just recognition. As if he were seeing something clearly for the first time. Or maybe for the last. "You said you loved me," he said quietly. The words didn't expect an answer. They didn't need one. They were just there. A statement. A memory. A truth that no longer held the same meaning. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. Time didn't move the way it normally did. Marcus finally leaned back in his seat, his eyes drifting forward again. The road. The darkness. The stillness. Everything outside the car looked exactly the same as it had before. Nothing marked what had just happened. No sign. No interruption. Just the quiet continuation of a world that didn't know. When Marcus reached for his phone, his movements were slow. Deliberate. He stared at the screen for a second before dialing. He didn't hesitate. Didn't reconsider. When the line connected, his voice came out calm. Even. "I need to report something." A pause. Then. "There's been a situation." He gave the location. Clear. Direct. No confusion. No attempt to explain beyond what was necessary. The voice on the other end asked questions. Marcus answered them. Simply. Without emotion. When the call ended, he set the phone down. Then he sat there. Waiting. No panic. No urgency. Just waiting. The same way he had waited for 3 days. The same way he had watched. The same way he had come to understand exactly what had been happening around him. Now, there was nothing left to watch. Nothing left to confirm. Nothing left to decide. In the distance, faint at first, then growing louder. Sirens. Marcus didn't move. Didn't react. He just listened. And as the sound approached, filling the empty road with something louder than silence, Marcus Hale remained exactly where he was. Still. Calm. and completely finished with everything that had come before. The first officer to arrive found Marcus exactly where he said he would be, sitting in the driver's seat. Hands visible, engine off. No attempt to leave. The flashing lights painted the inside of the car in red and blue, but Marcus didn't react to them. He just looked straight ahead, as if the road in front of him still mattered. The officer approached slowly, cautious but controlled. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle." Marcus nodded once. No resistance. No questions. He opened the door and stepped out, his movements steady, almost mechanical. When the officer guided him to the side, Marcus complied without hesitation. "What happened here?" the officer asked. Marcus looked at him briefly, then answered in the same calm tone he had used on the phone. "It's already done. Nothing more." The investigation moved quickly. There was no mystery about who had done it. No missing pieces in terms of physical evidence. Marcus had stayed. He had called. He had not tried to hide anything. But motive, that was where the case took shape. Detectives searched the house the next morning. Phones were collected. Messages reviewed. Timelines reconstructed. The texts between Alyssa and Daniel were found within hours. Last night shouldn't have happened. Then why did it feel like that? Short. Simple. But enough. Investigators built the sequence step by step. Friday night, the dinner. Early morning, the betrayal. 3 days, silence, observation, continuation. Fourth night, the drive. Every moment lined up. Not chaotic. Not impulsive. Structured. That word came up more than once in the reports. At the station, Marcus sat across from 2 detectives. He wasn't handcuffed during questioning. He didn't need to be. "Marcus," one of them said, leaning forward slightly, "we just need you to walk us through what happened." Marcus looked at the table for a second, then up. "I already told you. We understand that. But we need details." A pause. Marcus exhaled slowly. "She told me she loved me," he said. The detectives exchanged a glance, waiting, and then she went to him. His voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It stayed exactly the same. "When did you find out?" "That night." "And you didn't confront them?" Marcus shook his head. "No." "Why not?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because I wanted to be sure." That answer changed everything. Because it wasn't about losing control. It wasn't about a sudden emotional break. It was about time. 3 days of it. 3 days of watching. 3 days of thinking. And that, to the prosecution, meant one thing. Intent. By the time the case reached court, the narrative had been clearly drawn. The courtroom was quiet the first morning. Marcus sat at the defense table, dressed in a plain suit, his posture straight, his expression unchanged. If anyone expected visible regret, they didn't find it there. Across the room, Daniel Hale sat among the witnesses. He looked different, not physically, but in the way he carried himself. Less certain, less untouchable. When their eyes briefly met, Daniel looked away first. The prosecutor stood, addressing the jury with steady confidence. "This was not a crime of passion," she said. "This was a calculated decision." She walked them through the timeline, message by message, day by day. He didn't act in the moment. He waited. He confirmed. And then he chose. Each word landed with purpose. Clear. Direct. Damning. The defense took a different approach. Their argument wasn't about denying what happened. It couldn't be. Instead, they focused on what had happened inside Marcus. "This is a man who spent his entire life searching for stability," the defense attorney said, pacing slowly. "And in a matter of hours, everything he believed in collapsed." He paused, letting that settle. "You heard the messages. You saw the betrayal. You understand the weight of it." The attorney turned toward the jury. This wasn't calculation. This was emotional fracture. When Daniel was called to testify, the room shifted. He walked to the stand with hesitation, his usual confidence gone. "Did you have a relationship with Alyssa Grant?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel swallowed. "Yes." "While she was involved with your brother?" A longer pause. "Yes." "And did you believe your brother knew?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No." "Did you ever consider how he might react if he found out?" Daniel didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered briefly toward Marcus, then back down. "No," he said quietly. Marcus never interrupted, never reacted. He sat there through every word, every detail, every confirmation of what he had already known. When it was his turn to speak, the courtroom felt smaller. The defense kept it simple. "Marcus," the attorney said gently, "do you regret what happened?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands, then up. His voice, when it came, was low, steady. I regret believing her. No elaboration. No apology. Just that. The jury listened. The court watched. And somewhere between the facts and the silence, the story settled into something undeniable. Not just a crime, but a chain of decisions, quiet, deliberate, and irreversible, that had led exactly where it was always going to end. The verdict came without drama. No outbursts. No visible collapse. Just the quiet weight of a decision that had been building long before the jury ever entered the room. Guilty. Marcus Hale stood as the words settled over him. His expression didn't change. His shoulders didn't drop. If anything, he looked exactly the same as he had the night everything ended, composed, still, already somewhere beyond the moment. The judge spoke. The sentence followed. Years. Measured. Final. Marcus listened without interruption. When asked if he had anything to say, he simply shook his head. There was nothing left to explain. After the trial, the story moved on without him. The headlines faded. The courtroom emptied. The case file was closed and filed away like so many others. But the damage didn't end there. It spread. Quietly. Daniel Hale didn't return to the life he had before. The bar where he worked let him go within weeks. Not because of what he had done, but because of what he represented. Customers recognized him. Conversations stopped when he walked in. The energy shifted in ways he couldn't ignore. He tried moving to another city, starting over. But the distance didn't change anything. Because the truth followed him. Not in headlines, but in memory. There were nights he sat alone, replaying the same moment Marcus must have lived through. The realization, the silence, the choice. Not because he understood it, but because he couldn't escape it. Daniel had never been the kind of man who thought about consequences. Now it was all he had. Alyssa Grant became something else entirely. Not a person anymore. Not in the way she had once existed. Her name lived in reports. In transcripts. In the voices of people who never knew her, but spoke about her as if they did. To some, she was a victim. To others, a catalyst. But to Marcus, she remained something more complicated than either. Not innocent. Not entirely guilty. Just the turning point. Years later, Marcus sat in a small interview room, across from a reporter who had spent months trying to understand the case. There were no cameras. No audience. Just a quiet conversation. Marcus, the reporter said carefully, people still talk about what happened. They try to make sense of it. Marcus didn't respond right away. He sat back in his chair, his hands resting loosely in front of him. They always will, he said. The reporter nodded. Do you ever think about that night? Marcus looked at the table, then up. Not the way they do. What do you mean? A pause. They think it started that night, Marcus said. It didn't. The room went still. It started the moment I believed her, he added. The reporter studied him. And do you regret it? Marcus held his gaze for a long second, then answered, I regret not knowing the difference. Outside those walls, life continued the way it always does. People fell in love, trusted each other, made promises they believed would last. Most of them never imagined how quickly that could change, how something quiet, something unseen, could grow beneath the surface until it became something else entirely, something heavier, something irreversible. Marcus Hale didn't become a different man in a single moment. He became one through a series of them. A look that lingered too long, a silence that said too much, a word that no longer meant what it once did. 3 days. That was all it took. 3 days to understand everything he needed to know. 3 days to lose what he thought he had built. And in the end, it wasn't anger that defined what happened. It wasn't even hatred. It was something far quieter. A kind of certainty. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that, once it takes hold, doesn't let go.